So thank you so much, Sal, Randy, and Steve for participating in the sport finance panel. Next up, we have the sport marketing panel, and we have with us today Ethan Brown from the Indiana Pacers. We have Andy Steen from Avaya. We have Keith Dobkowski from NFL Media, and we have moderating Geoff Goldman. All right, so you guys can get started.
All right, thanks. We'll start just by asking Andy and Keith and Ethan a little bit about what you do and what your company's current priorities are. And Andy, Avaya is a business communications firm. It seems like more of a business-to-business marketing place. So could you talk a little bit about what you do, what investments Avaya has in sports, and why sports marketing is a good fit for your company?
Sure. So I work for Avaya, and that's a business telecommunications company. So if you think about, 9 out of 10 banks are powered by Avaya, 9 out of 10, airlines powered by Avaya. So, we're a big company that does lots of different verticals. Sports is a vertical for us as well. My role, I manage all of our sports marketing for the company, and we have over about 100 stadiums and different activations that happen across the company. And it's really cool because I can be one day working on the World Cup, and we powered 7 out of the 12 stadiums for that. And the next day I get to work on the Super Bowl. And the day after that, I get to work on the NCAA, and then I get to go back to our naming rights stadium, which is Avaya Stadium, which is in Silicon Valley. So we named it. I actually was the person who went out and looked at the space and said, who's naming this stadium? And we put the deal forward, and really were able to name a stadium, which was a really cool thing to do if you're a marketing person. It's kind of a bucket list kind of deal. And so I have a fun role. I think people joke around with me at the company that I have the best job in the company, and I agree.
Keith, similar for you. We first met when you were at Fox Sports Digital. You're now at the NFL. Could you talk about what you do? You work with all 32 teams. And talk about what challenges that presents in working with the 32 teams and their different goals and viewpoints.
Yeah. So joined the league recently. We've got an interesting department. We are league employees, but we're basically internal consultants, and we've got 32 clients. 32 different clubs and 32 different markets with 32 different needs and 32 different team structures. We have teams like the Cowboys that have a 20-plus person digital staff, and we have teams like the Bengals where I think it's less than 3, depending on the day of the week. So our group is a digital strategy group. We oversee basically 5 main components. We have account management, which is day-to-day interaction with the clubs. We have platform strategy, which is what platform should they use. We actually just rolled out a new CMS, content management system, and updated all the websites for all 32 clubs. That all happened this summer. We have a monetization strategy team. So how do we actually make money on all the digital properties? So that includes how do you make money on Twitter and Facebook and your website and your app. We have social strategy, which being the league, we're in a fairly good place working early on with Facebook and Instagram and whatnot and launching new products with them. And then we have my group, which is really audience strategy. And so we work on content optimization, we work on search, we work on marketing initiatives. I'm actually working right now on a new app development plan as to whether or not we could centralize all of the club apps into a singular platform. So a lot of fun. A lot of good perks. I get to go to the Super Bowl this year, which I've never been to a Super Bowl, so pretty happy about that. Yeah. Oh, great. I'll see you there. So that's my group.
Ethan, Pacers had a great year last year. Surprised a lot of people. Finished 5th in the East. Took LeBron and the Cavs to 7 games in the playoffs, which I attribute mostly to you.
Absolutely.
And really recaptured the city and the imagination of Indiana. Your role, and also, would you talk a little bit about the We Grow Basketball Here theme and tagline that you introduced last year?
Sure. So hi, everybody. My role with Pacer Sports and Entertainment is I'm VP of Marketing and Brands, which means I'm essentially head of marketing for the Indiana Pacers, the Indiana Fever, which is their WNBA team, the Fort Wayne Mad Ants, which is our G League team and also prominently featured in NBA 2K 2019, as well as Bankers Life Fieldhouse, which is the arena that the Pacers and the Fever play in. So as it relates to probably broader brands and marketing initiatives, for us as a regional sports and entertainment company, we are so laser focused on not only understanding who our fans are, but also our broader community. Many folks within Indiana think of the Pacers less as a for-profit NBA franchise and more as a community institution. And there is responsibility that comes with that. And we have been in markets since 1967. We were one of the teams in the ABA, along with the Spirits of St. Louis. And as one of the few teams that came over to the NBA, we have carried a very rich history of providing the best level of basketball played in what most people most commonly think of Indiana, which is the heartland of basketball. So that is why we as a franchise have always talked about our team and our franchise as essentially a steward for basketball in the state of Indiana. So when we talk about our brand, we talk about how we grow basketball here. The we is not just the franchise, it's our fans, it's the people on the basketball operations sides, it's us, it's our community relations group, and how we are actively literally growing the game of basketball in every community in the state and using our platform to help showcase that how great basketball can be played and why Indiana, of all states in the US, has the right to say that we are the heartland for basketball. So that's where the positioning came up, and we've been really being able to communicate that over the last couple of years. And luckily, and I don't want to take credit, although Geoff loves to give me credit for it, luckily we have a team and we have players who fit so naturally into the brand narrative that we have not only created, but that we've built on to communicate to our fans. So for those of you who may not be big NBA fans, Victor Oladipo went to IU as an undergrad, and he spent a few years in the NBA on a number of different teams, and then was traded to our team when we traded Paul George. And he has publicly said that he loves playing in Indiana. He loves the values of basketball, and he loves having a team-oriented mindset, which is exactly what Hoosiers value. So it's just nice to have, and sometimes teams don't have this nice mix, and sometimes by accident, and sometimes on purpose, of a culture and a brand that pervades itself from the marketing side to literally the guys on the court.
So, Ethan, you talked a lot then about brand. Keith, you deal with the NFL, the Shield, that brand, and the 32 teams brands, and Andy, you have the Avaya brand. But in 2018, when the media landscape has changed so much and continues to change, Americans are still watching sports in massive numbers, but for other television, entertainment, newspapers, radio, a lot of traditional media, the reach has declined significantly. So how do you reach consumers or your target audience, in your case, other businesses, with your brand message in 2018?
Want me to go first? Okay. So a number of ways. We're a B2B brand, so we are business to business. And so, the consumer side, at the end of the day, everyone's a consumer. So when you're putting your brand out there in a stadium, whether that's digital signage or that's an activation that happens, you might be doing hospitality. I mean, you've got to make sure you've got a really good, solid strategy of how you're going to do that, because it's not just going to happen magically. So what we will do is we'll make sure, first of all, we'll do a lot of targeting to make sure we have the right people coming to see that. So we'll do hospitality that is very, very focused. in a stadium that we're powering. So one of our strategies is we don't put our brand in a stadium that is powered by somebody else, a competitor. And if you can imagine, when I first started at Avaya, we had our name on a lot of different things and assets, and I did an audit and went through and basically got us out of every sponsorship that had nothing to do with our technology, and also opened the door for maybe a sales conversation for somebody to go in there and sell Avaya if you wanted us to stay. And that conversion of the sponsorships that we had, we ended up with about 5 sales out of that, and we continued to do those sponsorships. So it opened up the door for sales. And in the end of the day, for me, my boss is never asking me, and my boss is our CMO, and then her boss is the CEO. So I get in a lot of conversations with the CEO and CMO about, what is the ROI of all of these sponsorships and why are we doing them? And they never ask me about impressions. The CEO is not asking me about impressions. He wants to know, how is this turning into revenue? And he wants to know how it's turning into revenue right away. We're a public company, and sales and growth matters. So that's another really important factor for us. So targeting and creating partnerships. Somebody said it earlier today that I hate that word sponsorships. So do I, because when we do a deal with a club, we will call it a partnership, and we'll do that initial contract and we'll feel really good about it. But later, if we're looking back at that contract, it's not a very good partnership. It's usually like, I'm calling you and we're doing favors, and we're all over the place in terms of where those favors are. And that's what a company like me, Avaya, is looking for in a sponsorship, is that type of ecosystem that I'm open to, that you can, you're on the team side, right? So you can introduce me to other partners that are sponsors that are there. They could potentially become my targets. I can open up the sales conversation for those. So it's really about getting into your ecosystem, and it's about making sure that when we do activate, that there is really a strong, sticky activation. It's not just our name being splashed on a banner, because nobody cares. I mean, they look at that for 2 seconds and then they're on to their beer and the game, and with Avaya, it even gets a little more tricky, because Avaya's name, I've had people come up to me and go, "Oh, are you the water bottle company?" And I'm like, "No." So throwing our name around isn't helpful either. It has to have substance, and it has to be in context of something else. So we have to be powering that stadium. So I'll take, for example, how we opened up Avaya Stadium, which is in Silicon Valley. One of the things that we wanted to do is they have the largest bar in North America. So it's the largest outdoor bar. So one of the sides of the stadium is just a bar, and anybody can go there. So you can sit there from the game and watch right from that side of the field. And because we knew that was such a fixture and part of the community and part of the asset, we turned a thing into that. If you came down and you downloaded the mobile app, which we created, which is one of the software pieces that we provided to the team, you downloaded that app, we gave you a free drink at the bar. So that made it real, because they had to, first of all, learn about our app, they had to download it, and they got a free drink. And we gave, the kids drinks, and we gave age-appropriate drinks for everybody. But it was a really smart way to activate, and those are the types of things that we're looking for as a brand, not to just put our logo somewhere, because, again, impressions, it doesn't matter.
Keith, similar question.
Yeah, so we're a content and entertainment company. We have, while the market has dropped substantially, most of you guys probably saw what happened with the Oscars, we're actually doing pretty well. If you look, CBS just had their best opening weekend in 20 years. Fox opening weekend of football was the highest was beat all of last year's numbers. I know the opening Thursday night wasn't great, but a lot of this, there's interesting factors. It'll be interesting to see what happens this weekend with the storm hitting the East Coast as to how that actually affects ratings. For us, and specifically our team, a lot of it is social, which is how do we reach a consumer directly. If you look at the average size stadium, which is between 65 and 70,000 people, the average club has a reach of 3 to 5 million people on social. It's our way of reaching these fans. Now, there are some markets, just with the Falcons, most of their social reach is local. You go to the Steelers, and 90% of their reach is actually out of Pittsburgh. So it's one way to actually get in front of the large number of fans. We are that one TV product that reaches, every Sunday, 15 to 20 million people. I think last year we had 16 regular season games that had more people watch than people who watched the Oscars. So we're a huge content company, but our interaction with the fans, and it's really, I think this is probably the better way we're looking at this, which is what type of fan are you, and can we get the right content in front of you at the right time? So if you are a diehard fan like me, let's say I'm a 49er fan, my entire fantasy football team is all 49ers. I know it's not great for winning, but it makes me happy every Sunday. How do you get the right thing in front of me? For me personally, I don't care what they do off the field. I want to know what they do on the field. But there are other folks who really want to see the helmet off content, who want to understand what the players do outside of the field, outside of practice. How do we get that message in front of them so that they can start to create those bonds with the players? I think Ethan just explained it very well, which is you have a brand of basketball that is the state of Indiana. How do you get people to take that pride in, as we all saw Hoosiers as kids, how do you get people to take that pride in Indiana basketball and then focus it on the Pacers, and you've got a spokesperson who can do it? If you get that person out properly and that he represents the entire state, you're able to create that connection with the fan. With us, it's kind of a similar thing, which is, what is that connection with the fan? What is it that allows you to have, to be hope? I know last year with the 49ers, we got Jimmy G, and the Bay Area had hope in our football team. And so how do you market that properly to let people know this is the guy who's going to bring back the glory days of Steve Young and Joe Montana? How do we connect it? And the answer is it's mostly through social, and then it's through conversion funnels. And so if you look at it, and I said this in the green room just a couple minutes ago, which is every user path is a bit different. Every step a user takes can be a conversion. So it could be, how do we get people to buy a hat? How do we get people to join the 65,000 others at a stadium? How do we get people to go from interacting with us on Facebook to typing in 49ers.com? And to understand financially, if somebody visits our sites, one of our 32 sites from Facebook, they go on average to 1.1 pages per visit. That means that they see there's 2 ads per page, so they see about 2 ads on that page. If somebody types in 49ers.com, they're going to go to 6 to 7 pages on that visit, which means all of a sudden they're seeing 12 to 14 ads. The amount of money is obviously 12 to 14 times greater. So it's that sort of conversion. And the conversion can be very simple, return to the site, and it could be very complex, buy season tickets. But we're studying each one of those to try to get the right message in front of the right fan to drive them through that conversion funnel where they go from passive to casual to active to avid.
Taking that a step further, that casual fan, Ethan, who perhaps isn't following the Pacers on social, maybe is only watching a few games on television and may or may not be coming to a couple games a year. How do you get that person converted into a bigger customer?
It's a great question. And I'm actually going to first ask audience here, how many of you have seen Hoosiers, the movie?
I'm going to answer too.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
literally looking around here, this actually is an example of what makes my job so awesome, but also so challenging. Because there is a generational difference there. There are folks who grew up having seen Hoosiers and know that history of Indiana and basketball, and then there is a younger generation that has not, right? That's not as resonant. So to your question, Geoff, and frankly to what these guys are talking about, as a sports team, we have many different types of consumers and fans. We talk a lot about how we've got a older fan who has, we try to attribute the type of ticket products or the type of behavior that we think that they're most likely to engage in given their own circumstances, whether it is personal demographics, household demographics of the sort, but then also did they grow up playing youth sports? How engaged have they been emotionally with the medium that we're talking about? So to your question around casual fans, the casual fans range from folks who either don't like basketball, don't like sports, or they're a huge basketball fan and for some reason they don't like the Pacers. Or they could be a basketball fan, they could be a Pacers fan, but they don't own a TV, so they can't watch any of the games. So what's a casual fan, guys? Like, which one of those is it? From my standpoint, this is what's so exciting is because we craft not only a strategy, but then different types of executions and activations in the market that are deliberately intending to reach these different types of fans based on our guess / projection of what we think they can actually do more of that they're not doing now. And another layer of this, of course, is what we were talking about before on B2B. Because that's a very different type of marketing mechanism than what we consider classic sort of fan marketing as well. So there are casual fans who are leaders in business, and to them, the proposition in part is the fact that we are an institution in the Indianapolis community, but it's also that we know how to drive your business forward. That's a very different message, and the channels that we have to choose, particularly with paid media, are very much going to be different than what they would be if we were just targeting your average fan. So even as you hear this, you realize that there's so many different ways to slice the pie, and you basically have to make the choice within those casual fans who is the one that if we actually paid money to try to get them to come to a game or get them to watch a game on Fox Sports Indiana, who's most likely to do it? And as a marketer, that's why we do what we do, is to figure that out.
So at Fox Sports, we basically created a swear jar for the term millennial. And the reason for it is that there are 80 million Americans who are millennials. A bunch of you in the room are millennials. How those folks can all have the same background, which is exactly what you're saying, and have the same message, resonate with them is just, it's a fallacy.
Yeah.
And that you get into it, that the things that millennials have in common, similar age group, some have kids, some don't, big difference. The biggest thing they have in common is digital. When they were born, the internet existed. And that's basically where it stops. And so if you look at it, which is, what is your background? What do you respond to? And we can do it real quick poll here of the people in the audience who uses Facebook as their primary social network. Raise your hand if you do. Okay, who uses Twitter? Who uses Instagram? Who uses Snapchat? Who considers YouTube to be a social network, and if they do, who uses that? So of the students that I saw, you guys all raised for different things. So it's very different. So defining casual fan becomes fairly tough.
Yeah.
And by the way, no one ever put money in the swear jar, but we talked about it quite a bit, which is, please don't say another thing like we need to target millennials.
You just said it now. So
I did. I owe 25 cents.
And this is the real challenge as a marketer, particularly when we're because I know you used to work at Fox, where we have many different broadcasters, vendors, the sort, who are trying to communicate the value proposition and who they can reach. And in many ways, it's still in the old currency of, and we talked about this on stage, reach overall in the community regardless of target, or it's based on age, right? In a pretty broad age, men 18 to 64. Like, are you kidding me, right? I mean, the way that we know, just from our own research that we've done and that the NBA League Office has done, that even within the millennial group, you could sub-segment that in 5 or 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different ways based on their attitudes towards sports, to like I mentioned before, whether they've played it already, or quite honestly, if they're married and have kids, the amount of pure time they have to spend engaging in anything other than what their kids are doing. Right. This is more the world. You can probably tell. I get engaged and really excited about this stuff because it is the challenge is, how do you, when you are presenting a product, the Pacers are the Pacers to everybody, whether you are Republican, Democrat, whether you are African American, white, you're a fan. So how do we reach everybody efficiently and in a way that makes sense and that we can appeal to all these different segments to help them to grow their affinity to our brand? It's amazing.
Pat, how are we doing on time?
We've got about 5 minutes.
Okay. So Steve asked a great question toward the end of the last panel about advice for potential job seekers. I'll put a little twist on that. Could you each talk a little bit about your career background and then give a little bit of advice? And we discovered that Andy and Keith actually worked together, sort of, at the San Francisco 49ers, leading them to a Super Bowl championship in 1992. I'll let you explain that.
Okay, thanks. So I started off my career working for the Warriors first, and I was a Warrior girl. I was on the dance team back then, and they weren't as good as they are now, so it was a different time and era for the Warriors. But it really gave me a view of how sports worked, and you were there, doing your particular role, but you can see how the whole business of sports comes together. And what was really shocking to me back then is there's not that many people that work, for the organization, and I was thinking it's a little small business. But when you see it from the outside and you're a fan, you don't realize that. You think it's this big thing and it's just way up here and you can't touch it. And when you get there, you're like, wow, you're doing every job. I mean, it's really like you're doing everything. And there's like maybe 50 people that work there. And that it kind of took the mystique off of it for me. And I thought, that might be something. And then I ended up being a 49er cheerleader and did other dance stuff. But then I settled down into working at an agency, and I worked at an agency for about 20-something years. And that was great because it is similar to what we heard earlier, a brand marketing agency, where I got to work with all different types of brands, and tech brands. So I got to work with, HP and Oracle, and tomorrow is Cisco, and the next day is a startup. And it was really, really interesting to work with that many different types of, companies and see how they all work. And then as I realized it, I'm like, well, they all have a sports practice. So I started to kind of shove my foot in the door to the sports angle. And so when I got the chance to work with SAP, I really shoved my foot in the door and said, I'll sign up for that team. I did extra work. I did extra, I would come to meetings that I would work long hours. Someone talked about that earlier, and really just start to become valuable to that team, to where they came to me and said, we're doing a meeting. Let's make sure Andy's in it. That's when you're really making a great job as a marketer, is the moment they don't want to do the meeting unless you're there. So always try to get to that place as a marketeer. And then, as I went to Avaya, they didn't really have a sports practice, but they had a lot of sports. It was just all over the place. And the first thing I did is I put my hand in there and said, I'll take that mess. And so that's how, that's where I ended up now. So always look for that opportunity, and always let the thing that's guiding you be, what matters to you, because I know that I will always be attached to sports somehow. I don't know what that will look like and always in my future, but I know I will. And what I would say to all of you, as you're looking for that, if it's in your heart, then just follow it. It's every time you get into a situation, look for the sports in it, and you'll find that there's a way. And I know that there's a lot of internships out there as you start to think about how do you get your role. Companies like mine, we hire interns all the time. So the way ours is structured, but I can call up my friend at SAP or Plantronics or whatever it is, and they're all doing internships as well. So we take on about 10 to 12 U.S. interns in marketing. And we have them work on a group project. We also have them rotate and learn all about marketing, because learning about all the different disciplines will help you. We have them work all of the games at Avaya Stadium. So they definitely get involved in the sports. And then we hire 2 at the end of the year. So maybe 2 or 3, or it depends on, if they're graduated or, where they are in their intern stage. Or they come back year over year, and they make great connections. So another person earlier said, how do I, have I ever been, hired from my resume? I've never been hired from my resume. It's always been somebody knew me that I worked with, and they put my name forward, and I shoved my foot in the door. So, that's what I've got to tell you, is be bold. Don't sit back waiting for somebody to do something. Get in there and say, I put your hand in the air. So that's a long story. Sorry.
Just to correct you, Geoff, we won the Super Bowl in 89, 90, and then 94.
Oh, sorry.
94.
and a couple other times too. So
There's
49ers.
5 of them.
So the job I had there is I sold sodas in the stands in high school. I learned nothing about the business. I basically did it to make some money on the side in high school, and I got in for free. And so I worked the San Francisco Giants games. I worked the 49er games. I would freeze my butt off. I'm used to swearing. Freeze my butt off at Candlestick, walking around the upper deck trying to sell sodas at night for the Giants games. That was hard, but I got to watch for free. Went to the Niners games, and you work the first 3 quarters, then you get to watch the fourth. So to me, it was a dream job as a 16 and 17-year-old. So my start in sports, I'd always wanted to work there. Probably like a lot of you, I just started sending blind applications to the Warriors. I did that every year. They never responded. I don't even think I ever got a thank you email. When I ended up going to grad school, went to law school at USF, and I ended up writing a paper there. And the paper ended up getting sold and published. And the guy who had purchased the paper offered me a job with the startup. And they were, Dan Rasher. He is a sports economist there. He'd built a product, and they were trying to create a website to support the product. And so I started there. I started to learn quite a bit. I ended up deciding one day that I could run my own website better. Launched a website and actually started doing pretty well on a budget of about $100 a month. I was driving about 30,000 unique people a month to the website. Started making pretty good money. And then, there was the malice at the palace. And when Ron Artest went into the stands, my website basically, I'm not supposed to swear because the school pooped the bed. So when that happened, I had to go find a real job. And I ended up getting hired by the AVP, Pro Beach Volleyball Tour. And somebody said earlier, it's a lot of work. I was working 90 to 100 hours a week. I did anything they asked, and I was the entire digital team. I had to learn how to redesign things. I learned HTML. By the way, I'm a poli-sci major, went to law school. I have no background in this at all. What I did, I've always been intellectually curious. And so I read a lot, I try a lot, I believe in trial and error. From there, a recruiter contacted me, ended up in horse racing for about this long, about the length of a Kentucky Derby. And then got a call one day from Fox Sports and ended up there for most of my career. And then the first one that wasn't a random recruiter reaching out was NFL. And that was a friend of mine had gone over there and said, there's a good role for you. We talked about this last night at beers after the game. And one of the things that had come up is, what advice would you give students? And it's fairly simple stuff. Work hard, be nice. Try to learn as much as you can. And I said, I've done a lot of presentations, a lot of conferences and panels. And my last slide always has the same 3 things about digital. It says, good content, good product, read. Read as much as you can. This stuff is changing so quick. What people use, how they use it, what I use, how I use it, why I use it, and those sort of things, just to learn as to where the industry's going.
And to clarify what the event he's talking about, it was an incident in Detroit where there was an issue with the security in the building. So let's just make sure that that's on the record versus anything regarding some of our ex-players. I know we're running over, so I'll cut this pretty short. I have one of the most unusual pathways into sports. Like you, I was a poli-sci major. I actually went to work in commercial theater on Broadway for about 7.5 years. First, basically working backstage, but then I ran a company for 5 years, producing and booking Broadway and off-Broadway shows around the country, including here in St. Louis. Sold the business, didn't know what I wanted to do next. Although I thought I wanted to maybe start another company, I went back to business school. I didn't come to this illustrious university, but I decided when I was there that I wanted to focus my career on building a skill set rather than industry focus. So that's when I decided that I wanted to become a best-in-class marketer, once I understood what that actually meant. And I realized that what I had been doing, starting my business and marketing it, was in fact called marketing. So then I went to work for a company called Unilever they have household brands. And I spent my last 4 years there managing and overseeing all their men's personal care brands. So brands like Axe, Degree Men, Dove Men Plus Care, major advertisers and sponsors in sports and as well as other verticals like lifestyle. And from there, because I had already been doing a lot of different activations and campaigns with various teams, leagues, athletes. That's how I got hooked up with one contact with the Pacers. And I never thought in a million years that I was going to move from New Jersey, where I grew up, to the heartland, like the heartland of the heartlands. But it's been nothing but fantastic because of just what the job is. So the reason why I explain that is because that is a really different way than what many people typically do when they think about wanting to work in sports. So what I tell folks in panels like this is think more broadly. So if there is something that you like doing, and it's not just working in sports, but like, let's say you love selling, or you love marketing, or you love digital, right? Build your expertise. Whether it's in sports, whether it's in any other type of industry, it will get recognized. And when you do that, that becomes a marketable asset that you have, that you can then leverage, whether you decide to work in sports or go work for a sports network, for a team, for a sponsor. That's what, it's definitely something that while you are here, explore what you're actually most interested doing and what you like doing, and then see where within the sports ecosystem that fits. So,
Questions or time for lunch?
Time for lunch.
good.
Let's hear it for this panel. Thank you, guys.
You guys are great.